Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Now That's Significant, a market research podcast. This is your host, Michael Howard, the Head of Marketing at Infotools. Today, we're joined by Dan Wasserman, Chief Operating Officer of KJT, a full-service strategic market research and consulting firm that is focused on the healthcare industry. Dan has worn many hats at KJT for the past 13 years. He has run a research team focused on both market research as well as health outcomes research, and has served as an operations leader overseeing KJT's information security management, research compliance, research operations, analytics, and general business operations. He's led the implementation for professional services automation and more recently gotten deep into the rise of generative AI. He's presented at IIEX.AI and also developed a prompt engineering course available to anyone in the insights industry. Thanks for joining us on the show today, Dan.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael. Great to be here.
You're welcome. So, Dan, what's the most significant thing you're going to share with us today?
Well, so today, we could talk about any number of things within the world of AI and the insights industry, but today I want to talk a little bit about prompt engineering specifically, near and dear to my heart. I think just the term itself sounds kind of intense to people, especially for someone who's non-really tech savvy, but I think there's a lot of value in learning a little bit more about how to use large language models for the future of how we work. And we'll get into it in a little bit, but there's a huge potential productivity boost. And I think it's pretty important for anybody in the industry to be thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone in the developed world anyway who hasn't tried searching for something in Google. How different is prompting to a Google search?
I think when people first started using ChatGPT, it came out in November of last year. And I think the initial use was, hey, I'm going to treat this like Google. And in some ways, that works. But what you get back most of the time when you treat them the same is something that isn't really that impactful. And you're kind of left feeling like, well, did I really need to use AI to go generate something for me? So I think there's a lot of principles from web searching, but there's also some other techniques that you can build in that make it a little bit more sophisticated in terms of what you're putting in. And that makes a really big difference in terms of the quality of the output ultimately.
Yeah, for sure. And for those of us that had been Googling for a while, we kind of learned how to get what we needed out of Google, didn't we? So likewise, it takes a little bit of time to learn how to get what you need out of the generative AI.
Yeah, exactly. And, I've seen some thoughts of folks in the industry that, in 5 years, maybe we don't need to really do our own prompting. And maybe it is more like a Google search and the language model can basically translate essentially the equivalent of a Google search more into a prompt and then actually run that through the model. But it's not where we're at right now. So if we want to get use out of this, and whether it's ChatGPT or Bard or Claude, or even in some of the tools that exist in the industry, it's helpful to have a little bit more sophistication there.
No, for sure. So just for those that may not be aware of KJT, do you want to give us a bit more of a background about that, please?
Sure. So we've been around since 2007. Our foundation is primary market research, qual and quant. We're healthcare focused. So we work with pharma, med device, health insurance clients from around the globe. So that's our bread and butter, but we've also expanded further into real world evidence generation and medical and scientific communications as well. But I think, that's what we do. But KJT is a special place for me. I've been there for 13 years now. We're an employee-owned, woman-owned, best place to work, corporate sustainability program. Like it's all these fun things, right? That just make me really excited about who I work with and what we're doing there. So just love every day, and everything's a little bit different, and that keeps me on my toes.
Yeah, nice. Sounds like a good place to work. So sounds like quite a broad offering of skills at KJT, and you mentioned before that generative AI or ChatGPT was launched November, so we're celebrating its birthday this month, which is a funny thing. I'm assuming that ChatGPT wasn't the first time that you'd actually been playing around with AI.
No, it wasn't. And, there's different kinds of AI, right? And we were chatting a little bit about this before, where there's AI really through automation, right? And generative AI has really blown up in the last year because of the quality of the model and the fact that ChatGPT is accessible by anyone. But I've taken some coursework on AI before. I am certainly not an expert in it, but I think I almost stumbled into what I've been doing for the past, I don't know, 6 to 9 months, is almost by accident in some way. I think my initial reaction when ChatGPT came out was, oh, you know what, this is another thing. It's getting hyped, right? This is going to pass at some point. It's some fun little tool that can make haikus, but like, what does this do for us in our daily jobs, right? So I missed on that one. So I didn't foresee that when it first came out, but then I think I realized by probably like mid-January that this was going to be different. I think our CEO was really good at giving me and some other people some nudges too. And after I started diving a little bit deeper, it really became a lot more clear about the power of what really exists beyond that. So it's not necessarily my background, but I like to think that I have enough of a technical background, and along with conducting research and all the other things I've kind of gotten my hands into, that I feel like I can translate a lot of what's going on in the AI space into something that's really practical for market researchers.
Yeah, in one of my previous companies, we actually created a digital concierge. So you walked into a retail shop, you pressed a button, spoke into a microphone, and it asked you what you're looking for. You can talk to it, etc. That was 2018. 2019, and that was conversational AI, and we thought, wow, this is amazing. People walking into the store like hadn't really played with anything like that before and thought this is awesome, but at its root it was still essentially a conversation tree. And the amount of work that had to go behind that, and if someone asks this, they answer with this here. If it's 80% like this question, this is a good answer for it. So we had to manually do all of that there. But generative AI is a completely different kettle of fish, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a great example. You think about if you were to, I don't know, run a survey, or you go ask anybody in your office, hey, do you like those chatbots on websites? Your bank and telephone provider, and everybody hates them. And they're really based on that old sort of technology where it's very scripted. You never felt like you were talking to anything like a human, and you could never really get your answer in a clear, concise, quick way. This has the power to be able to evolve that kind of experience very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note as well, like not all AI is actually AI, is it? Some people go around masquerading that their tool is, and it's really just a small little algorithm or if statement, or even macro that you could find in Excel or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly for folks client side, agencies, res tech, that's something to be really cognizant about, and really understand, what it is that you are potentially buying when you're talking about, integrating a new platform into your business. It's like, do you really understand what's going on here? Is it really AI? Is this really transformational? And there's a lot of, questionable sales techniques going on right now in the industry, unfortunately. There's a lot of really great stuff. I don't want to be sour about everything, right? But you really have to be sort of focused on what is the value, what does this actually do, and how is it different, and how can this positively impact our business?
So why is that important for the market researcher to understand what actually is happening under the hood?
Well, so, I think a good, clear example that I think is going to, maybe tug at the heartstrings of a lot of market researchers is if you are, let's say, analyzing data, and it could be qualitative data, it could be quantitative data, and you are running your data through something that is more algorithmic, something that is more pre-programmed, and it's taking A and doing some things to it, and then eventually you get B that comes out of it. That's one thing. But when you are taking that same information and that's going through a large language model, and then that is going to end up giving you an output, right? Those are two different things. And I think for anybody who's even just experimented a little bit, played around with something like ChatGPT, about hallucinations, right? And so understanding, even just from a negative perspective, is this something that is potentially actually going to harm what I'm doing because maybe I can't trust this, or what safeguards are in place to make sure it's actually pulling the correct information? There's some really sophisticated companies out there that are doing a really good job of trying to limit those hallucinations and make sure that everything is being cited, right? But that's one example of making sure that what's happening with the data. Another one is going to be, well, where are my data going? So when we start talking about data privacy, data security, there's been a lot of concern, understandably so, with folks putting confidential information, sensitive information to something like ChatGPT. There are some really easy ways to go around that. A lot of technology platforms are using the API to connect in to the GPT-3 or GPT-4 model. And that allows them to ensure that their data is not being used for any model training, right? And things like that. OpenAI has done a lot in terms of enhancing its security, but right, it depends on your industry. It depends what data are going through it. So that, to me, these are just a couple of examples of understanding what's happening to my data. What is the result for me? What are the implications from a compliance standpoint, a bias standpoint, all of these things.
Yeah, and then there's also that consideration around confidence levels. I mean, researchers love their 98% confidence of this or that.
Yeah, we do.
But what's that gonna look like with generative AI?
Well, it's a really good question. In terms of quantitative data, I think my sense is where a lot of folks in the industry are trying to go is, let's try to still tabulate our data. We're still going to tabulate it in some fashion. Now, whether that's through more of a traditional technique or whether generative AI can help us do that maybe more efficiently. But then we can use generative AI to take those data, mine it in some way, summarize it in some way. But if you have the summary, right, in a table format, then that does allow you to have, some sort of source of truth to go back to and say, okay, I know 54% of respondents said XYZ, right? And I know that the confidence level is going to be this because it was a sample size of that. So you can still do some calculations that way. I think where we run the risk is when you're skipping that step and you're just going to the, well, hey, give me the summary of what we heard, what we saw in the data. There really isn't necessarily a confidence level that I've seen that we can put into that. One of the things that I keep harping on people about is, ChatGPT can't count. You try to get it to count. Sometimes it can kind of fool you and it sort of counts, but it's not a math model. It's a language model for a reason, right? So if you're trying to do, say, a qualitative analysis through a large language model, there's probably some pretty sophisticated things companies like, the Yabbles of the world are trying to tackle, where, you're not just putting the data into ChatGPT and saying, oh, well, tell me the top 3 mentions here and tell me how many people said that. You're not going to get the right result when you do that. And you either have to be comfortable with that sort of level of ambiguity, and maybe it's helpful enough when you're putting together a top line report, quick summary for a client, something like that, or another stakeholder internally. But that's probably not going to be enough for us to go and put together reports for what we traditionally do, right, for qualitative market research.
Hmm.
I wouldn't feel confident enough in that personally.
No, sure. And I guess there's that risk of potentially growing laziness as well. Like, oh, it can just do that. And if you don't check your numbers.
Yep. You need to have the human involved ultimately in this, right? I think when ChatGPT first came out, right, there was the wave of everybody saying, oh, our jobs are at risk. And there was a little bit of defensiveness because of that. And there's probably some of that still is true in pockets, but I think a lot of what people have eventually sort of gravitated towards is ultimately, can we get, say, 75% of the way there with generative AI? But the human still needs to be involved, right? The human really understands the context. The human is the one having the interaction between the client, the research agency, right? We still can't necessarily take everything that Gen AI is giving us and feel 100% confident, going back to your example, that there isn't a hallucination, that there isn't some sort of bias that exists in there. So ultimately, our name as a researcher, as a research firm, it's on it. So we have to own it and we have to accept what the output is. And if we don't like it, then it's up to us to change it or to go through manually, right? Or a more traditional fashion. We can't just, let it do its thing and say, oh, you know what? Well, the machine did it. It's not good enough.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've sort of covered this a little bit now, but AI obviously is a hot topic across most industries. But for market research, what's your view on where we are at the moment? What are you seeing or hearing or, or experiencing even?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of experimentation going on, and I think that's good. I really do. I think the best learning is by doing. If you follow Ethan Mollick, Wharton professor on LinkedIn, if you're really into this stuff, please follow him. He's fantastic. He's called generative AI. The best use case right now, it's a personal productivity tool. So yeah, there are some sort of larger systematic enterprise, knowledge management components, right? Data mining that you can do. But the thing that it's best at right now is all the personal productivity stuff. So I think that's good. I'm seeing that. But what's been interesting to me is I kind of feel like I've seen two camps of people in the industry. The first camp is people who are a little bit more resistant to generative AI. And, there's lots of good reason to be. They're concerned about watering down the research. Are we going to provide less value to clients or less value to our internal stakeholders? Are we trying to squeeze more out of less, right? Like, are we trying to tell everyone, oh, you actually just have to do 2 jobs now? Are we getting rid of their jobs? There's concern over data privacy and bias. And there's just this lack of comfort because people don't know the difference, to your point from before, right? Like a Google search versus a prompt. There's all these different things going on all at once. So it's a little bit of an unknown. And so I think there's that lack of comfort that exists in a sizable segment. And then there's this other group that I think largely don't necessarily know that much about AI, but they kind of know they need to do something, and they're learning. They're doing more of the experimenting. So yeah, so right now, that's a lot of what I'm hearing, but we're also finalizing the results of an industry survey right now. We did this in partnership with VoiceForm, excuse me. It's a great company. So I can't wait to get into the data and see what other nuances I may be missing here. But I think there's a lot of rich information we're going to get out of it for sure.
Yeah, nice. So let's get into prompt engineering then. Can you tell us a bit about this? What it is, how it may have evolved, or your perception of it changed since you started really getting into it in January?
Yeah, I think people hear the term prompt engineering and they're like, this is kind of scary, right? It sounds very technical. It has engineering in the name of it, of course. I think really it's learning more formally how to interact with large language models. And I think when you say it's like that, it feels maybe a little bit less onerous. So I don't know. I keep saying prompt engineering. Maybe I should drop that term because it sounds a little bit scary. But, I think for me, it's very empowering when I feel like I know what I can get out of ChatGPT. I feel a lot more confident. It lets me try new things. It lets me help other people at KJT. It is something that I think is, it's evolved, right? From that sort of initial people are using a Google search to now there's a lot better understanding of, okay, we have to use certain phrases. We have to be able to tell the model, hey, I want you to go and act like this, or write something for this kind of persona, right? I want you to think like a AI assistant for me and ask me questions. There's so many different ways that you can go about this, but it's super powerful, right? I think in some ways, to me, it's almost like using Excel or using Google, like you said before, right? It's formalizing something that we could figure out ourselves, but we probably wouldn't be that great at it unless we spent a lot of time just playing and figuring it out. So I think the more that we can kind of pick up and adapt what some of the thought leaders in the industry are doing, the better, right? So I went through earlier this year, I took a fantastic course on Coursera from Dr. Jules White from Vanderbilt. Would certainly encourage anybody if you're really interested in this. He goes through tons of different use cases. But again, I think it's sort of demystifying a lot of the, well, what is this prompt engineering? What does this mean? And what is this all about? And how can I do this myself? So I think it's a way to be more effective overall. It's not really learning a programming language. It's just sort of using a little bit of, magic here and there, but really just some tips on how to go structure what you're doing to get better results.
So you're saying it's kind of like reading the instructions?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. We're trying to ultimately, we're translating what's in our head, right? We have some idea of like, hey, I want to go develop a questionnaire. I want to go develop a screen or a discussion guide or an email. And, I'm creating instructions to go give it to a large language model. Well, give me some instructions on how best to do it.
And I guess there's an onus on companies to actually provide a framework for their employees in terms of how to use it, best practices, and even potentially help training up their own models. So this is best practice XYZ. When you're looking at doing this here, type in this here.
Yeah, I just saw a study recently that said that companies that don't have an AI policy, there's sort of no instruction on use. There's sort of nothing given to them by the company. I think it's like 40% of employees are still using ChatGPT for basically anything they want. So to me, like the takeaway is if you don't tell employees what to do, they're just going to go do their own thing anyway. And so it's probably, best for companies to think about what it is that we need our employees to try to improve, right? Every company is in a different place. So for us as a research agency, if there are ways that we can do background research more easily, if there are ways that we can, maybe get in the bare bones of questionnaire or discussion guide, or maybe use it to figure out what are different questions we could potentially ask or different consulting frameworks that we could go and use, right, that help us kind of frame out a problem. That's to our advantage as an employer to help basically empower our employees to go and give them a head start on how to be able to do all those things more effectively. But the other side of it, though, is you don't want to stifle innovation. No. You don't want to stifle creativity. So you don't want it to be so formulaic where you're just giving the instructions to your employees. You want to kind of help show them, hey, here are some good ideas, but they also have to figure out what works best for them. And they may come up with even better prompts, to be honest. We're all still learning from each other.
I've got no idea how this could happen, but it'd be interesting if like your SMRs of the world could have a code of conduct or ethics kind of API. So whenever you do something as a researcher through a large language model, it can go through that. And then you have a level of compliance at the back of it, which would be quite cool.
Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, I know SMR is working on looking at lots of different aspects of AI. The Insights Association is as well in the US. So it's a great idea. Hopefully we'll see some good progress from them in the next few months.
That's right. And obviously a big part of prompting as well as data quality. So having good data to be able to ask things of it is hugely important as well.
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out. We understand that as market researchers, and the other part too for me is generative AI is really good at brainstorming, generating content. There's some questions about whether it's really good at creativity. We could probably talk for an hour just about that, but it's a little bit slower maybe to be able to analyze data with a lot of success right now. It's just, it will come, but I think that's, the other piece of it, which is it's not necessarily the perfect fit at the moment, but if you also have maybe data that isn't super clean, not necessarily the right format, or we certainly know about some of the issues with data quality, fraudulent respondents and all that, right? Like now you're just making it even worse, right? You're compounding that. So I feel like we got to catch a break somewhere, but it's important to be cognizant of that for sure.
That's right. So at Infotools, our platform is an analysis and reporting tool for quant data. And we're playing around at the moment with a chat GPT version of it, where we run our analyses and then we can type into a prompt bar, like, what can you see from this data? And it can pull out a nice, succinct summary for you of what it's seeing. So it's sandbox data is what you're seeing in the analysis and the data that you put in. And that's a really good use case for it. So it's not trying to mine the internet or public data per se. So a good augmentation, if you will.
Yeah, and I love that. And you raised a really important point as well, which is when we're prompting the model, is it just looking at our data? Or is it looking to its vast training database as well? And sometimes that's not always clear. So again, these are questions to, ask, any technology offering like Infotools, right? To make sure that you understand what's working and what's not working.
That's right. And something that has kind of been lost in this whole discussion is the term explainable AI. And that's a big piece of compliance that needs to happen around the world. And if you can't explain how your software or whatever's arrived at its conclusion or how it has, then you're potentially non-compliant with a lot of laws out there as well. So.
Yep, we're in a regulated industry like healthcare, so I hear that loud and clear, right? Financial services,
Yeah.
but to me, it even goes beyond that, which is, market researchers, we want to have trust in the result, and so if you do have that explainability, I think that goes a long way to getting people on board. I really do.
Absolutely. So what's an example of what you can do better as a researcher if you learn more about prompting?
Yeah. So, I've thrown out a couple of different examples. I think for me, somebody who's, let me give you an example of like somebody who's maybe 5-10 years in the industry, use ChatGPT to go help you write a discussion guide. Somebody who's done it for 20 years, they can probably, bang that out. It's like the back of their hand because they've just done it 1,000 times at this point. But, the prompting that you can go and create essentially an outline in ChatGPT for your discussion guide. You can have ChatGPT edit that outline if you don't like the sections and what that's done for you. And then once you're happy with that, then you can go and actually prompt it to expand that into a more formal discussion guide. And so discussion guides can be lots of different things to different people, but so there's different flavors that might work better for you. But if I can take literally 5 minutes and give myself a pretty good starting spot, that seems like a win to me. Whereas, a lot of what I would be doing historically in my role as a researcher, I'd be spending probably at least half an hour, 45 minutes kind of outlining all of those sections, and then I'd go back and refine anyway. So let me use AI to just give me basically a head start. So I think, that's a really good, clear example. I've used that before. Another good one for me is, can use ChatGPT to generate content for something like a webinar or an internal training. It can give you ideas for topics. It can generate interesting titles. It can generate an outline. It can help give you ideas for the content on the slides or how you're even going to lay it out. So I do think a few prompts, learning what use cases are more relevant to you, can certainly save you an hour or 2 hours in a week.
And it's time that you can put to diving into your analyses more, or good point.
And it may not seem like that much, right? Like, oh, I'm only saving an hour, I'm only saving 2 hours, right? But for you and everybody else on your team, if you all do that, that really adds up over time. And as you get more sophisticated, right, you should be able to gain efficiencies there. So I'm big on trying to encourage people, think small, start, explore, and see where you get, and then you're going to continue to improve over time.
No, true. And I mean, for those of us that have done the various personality tests and things like that as well, like if some of us are more direct in our language and approach, that can help us soften and remember how to appeal to a broader audience as well. So there's all sorts of benefits there, which may be very much ancillary. But
yeah, I'm not the most creative when it comes to thinking up like titles or how to hook somebody in or something like that. So that's my inspiration, right? Like, let me go to ChatGPT, let me get 10 ideas on how to do it. And 9 times out of 10, I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. Let me go and edit this word, but I'm good to go.
Yeah. No, so you're still ultimately the author because you're deciding what to put your name to.
Always.
So you recently released a prompt engineering course, as you'd mentioned. That's pretty cool. Thank you. What can you tell us about the course and why did you put it together?
Yeah, it's very exciting. Not only the going through it, I'm excited that it's done, right, and that it's out there, because it took a lot of experimenting, going through what other folks are doing, right, to kind of get an understanding of, well, here's some good techniques from this camp, here's some other techniques from this camp, and so for me, where this came from ultimately was seeing a lot of people feeling like they're really just struggling with prompting. And I felt like there's some really good things that I'm hearing, but a lot of what I was hearing wasn't necessarily tailored to what our researchers do every day and what end clients do every day and what, research technology partners, what they're doing every single day. And so I think that is cumbersome. It is, I think, a challenge for people to feel confident about getting into prompting when you kind of don't know how to do it specifically, or you haven't seen those good use cases for what you're trying to do every day. And so for me, that was really the impetus around it. Was I felt like, hey, internally, we need some of this knowledge, right? Like, let's make sure that everybody has a resource and training that they can use as a foundation. But then it started getting even bigger than that. I thought, well, hey, if other people in the industry are interested in this, hey, let's give them access, and let's see if this just kind of raises the bar across the board. And I certainly hope that some people are interested in it. But honestly, even if they go through it, they may come up with some even better prompts, and I hope they share that with me. And again, it's sharing knowledge across the board.
Yeah, nice. I'm gonna definitely give it a shot. So, how long is the course?
Yeah, so it's about 2 hours, but it's sort of a packed 2 hours. So it's asynchronous. So think of a LinkedIn Learning, think of a Coursera if you've ever done anything like that. And there's a little bit of background on large language models and generative AI. There's some sort of prompting foundations, and then you get right into prompts, specific prompts for all sorts of things that we need to do as market researchers. And my suggestion to anyone who is thinking about going through it, like, obviously you could kind of binge it right in a morning or an afternoon and you kind of get through everything. But I think actually the best way to do it is go through at your own pace. Go through a little bit, open up ChatGPT on the side, try some of the prompts, right? Go back to the next lesson, try some of those prompts. So it's 2 hours of content, which is pretty easy, I think, digestible to get through. But I also think, there's some other wiggle room in there of learning through experimenting, through applying that I think is invaluable. I could tell you all the things in the world, but you got to try and apply it and see what ultimately works well for you.
That's right. And just seeing it in action, it is something that kind of blows your mind. It's like, wow, that's awesome. It's in one sense, it's hard not to get addicted when you can see what it is possible. I mean, for instance, you may have an article that someone in your team has produced, like, write me 3 LinkedIn posts from this article, and it just hits different topics that are pulled out, or themes that are pulled out on the topic. It's quite powerful. And it could even be an email to your work or client or something. So personal productivity, as you said.
Yeah, it reminds me, the other day I found this prompt. LinkedIn is another great resource of just lots of people trying things and they're posting stuff. And sometimes it's not that helpful, but you get some great nuggets too.
Yeah.
Actually, now ChatGPT, at least in the paid version, you can go and upload images in there and it'll go and analyze it. So I went and took a screenshot of my most popular LinkedIn posts. And so it has like the title in there and kind of the first little bit has a little screenshot of whatever the image was. And so I threw that in to ChatGPT and said, oh, here's all of my most popular stuff on LinkedIn, analyze these, and then think step by step and help me understand what are 10 other topics that I could go and write about, right, that are similar. And then from there, right, okay, I love this idea. Let me get a title, maybe give me some ideas of what I could talk about. And then again, I'm going to go turn it into my own thing, right? I want it to be my voice ultimately. But this is helping me think in a way that either would take me a ton of time to go and do it, the mental load associated with it, but it's also just doing it probably faster. So
it makes you sound more intelligent as well.
Hopefully, I can only hope. I don't know. Maybe some people out there are reading my posts and thinking, "Oh boy, what's this guy talking about?"
Yeah, is he real? Is this just generated, Dan?
It's some. I'm just an avatar at the end of the day. But yeah, it's interesting. I did experiment with having ChatGPT write some of my posts several months ago, and then I'd go through and certainly edit it. And I found that consistently, when I wrote from my own voice, I was getting much better reception to it, more impressions, more comments, engagement on it. And so that also taught me, okay, so what I was doing wasn't really working all that well, right? But I learned through experimentation. So now I'm having to give me some ideas of maybe some of the things I can talk about, and that gives me a head start. But again, I'm going to go put it in my own voice because I don't know. The numbers tell me, I guess that's what people are more interested in.
Yeah, that's right. Look, and so I think it's really easy to get caught up in the technology with AI, with generative AI, with prompting, for instance. But the whole purpose of this and this conversation is not to learn how to use the tool better, but to understand the tool so we can better serve our customers and our clients and consumers as a whole. So needing to keep them at the forefront, like this is why we're doing it, so we can be more productive. We can spend that time to actually better serve them.
Yeah, absolutely. It is hopefully going to elevate all of our roles so that we can be more thoughtful, we can be more strategic. And if we can get rid of maybe some of the, I don't know, administrative stuff, some of the more basic stuff, and just have it give us a head start on those things, who wouldn't want that? I just saw a survey from Microsoft, 9 out of 10 employees all say something like that. That's what they want. So people are into it, but just what flavor of it and how do you do it? That's what remains to be seen. That's the real question.
Very true. So any final words before we close, Dan?
I just appreciate you having me on, Michael. It's a great opportunity to catch up, chat a little bit on a topic that I feel like I've been kind of spinning my head around for months here, right? It's like one week I feel like I know everything. The next week it's like I don't know anything. at all. Just things are changing so quickly. But
Yeah.
my words of encouragement to everyone are, don't be afraid. Definitely, watch what you're putting into a tool like ChatGPT, but, a little bit of work on your side, whether that's through, the course that I put together, or, something else that you find, your coworkers, right? But a little bit more sophistication can go a really long way. And so I'd encourage people to go and take a little bit of time to look into it.
Yeah. Thank you kindly for sharing.
Absolutely. Great to be here.
Cheers. So thank you once again for all those that have listened in, chimed in here. And if you have found this episode interesting and thought-provoking, feel free to share the episode with others as well. Leave a review on your podcast platform or YouTube, or however you've found us today. Also, feel free to check out the course notes as well. The podcast notes, episode notes. We'll have a link in there to access the course that Dan's put together as well. Until next time, thanks for listening to Now That's Significant.